Just moving on to modern slavery. But basically, the government have introduced this piece of legislation, and it comes into effect, well, it started to come into effect from the 31st of March. And basically what it does is that if you're a business which has a global turnover of £36 million a year or more, then you have to publish an annual slavery and human trafficking statement. And basically, you've got to make that statement, well, your first financial year end after the 31st of March this year. So if your year end is 31st December 2016, then that's what would trigger your obligation to publish a statement. And it's very simple. It's basically a statement that you've got to disclose what steps as an organisation you've taken to ensure that human trafficking is not taking place in any of its supply chains or its businesses. As always the case with the government, it's as clear as mud. They've not been very clear about it. So when do you have to publish a statement? Well, they've said as soon as reasonably practicable after the end of your financial year. Generally, it's thought that that's within 6 months of the end of your financial year. You would expect to see it on your website. And the idea is it's got to be on your website. It's either got to be on your homepage or it's got to be a prominent link from your homepage to the statement. And as I say, the statement could simply be, we've not done anything about modern slavery and we don't intend to do anything about it. If you've not got a website, then you've got to have it available and you've got to send it within 30 days of someone requesting it. And it's a really bizarre piece of legislation, and it's probably a sign of the times from the government that are short of money and don't want to spend a lot of money in policing and ensuring enforcement and compliance. Because there's not really a great deal they can do. All they can do is take an injunction out against you to require you publish something. And they've not got anyone that's going to sit there sieving through everyone's websites to make sure it's gone up. And they've been very open that they've ultimately said, as far as we're concerned, the media and the unions are going to be the enforcers of this. And you know, they're the ones that are going to be trawling people's websites, looking about whether someone's published a statement, whether they've done it in a reasonably practicable time, and how that ultimately is what it says in the statement. And they think that the fear of naming and shaming from a PR perspective will be sufficient for businesses to adhere to and publish and think about these statements. So there's no fines if you don't do it. There's no real penalties. The only thing would be is that they could apply to the courts for an injunction forcing you to publish a statement, and obviously you'd have to pay the government's costs in taking you to court in doing that. So it's worth doing to avoid that scenario happening. I think where the impact of this, where you've seen the impact of this already, is that even if your turnover is less than £36 million a year, but you're in a business-to-business scenario of supplying services or goods, then the person at the top of the tree, who is at more than £36 million, will want to see that you've done this and that you've applied your mind to it to either be able to tender or to do business with them. Because, you know, if you're using, say, Sainsbury's as the example, they will want to go down the whole of their supply chain to make sure that there are no human trafficking or modern slavery issues. So if you're only a 2 million turnover business, yes, you wouldn't have to make a statement, but it's likely that if you want to continue to do business with Sainsbury's, then you're going to have a statement, and you're going to have to basically give them evidence of the fact that you've looked at this and that there's no modern slavery or human trafficking issues within your business. So what's your business operating model? Have you identified the whole supply chain, which is the point about, say, Sainsbury's looking right the way down to the smaller supplier? Are there any particular issues with suppliers, trade unions or other bodies representing workers that should be disclosed? You know, is there a collective negotiation? Is there a collective claim taking place? Is there accusations that have been made? What wider policies are in place? So have you got an anti-slavery and human trafficking policy? Have you got a whistleblowing policy? Is there a clear grievance procedure, ability for someone to raise complaints in an anonymous and supported way? So who within the management team has responsibility for ensuring compliance? What due diligence of supply chains will be carried out? Is there evidence of stakeholder engagement? Are actions taken to embed respect for human rights and zero tolerance of modern slavery throughout the organisation? How is risk monitored and evaluated? So as I say, even if you don't have to do this, it's likely that one of your suppliers that is more than £36 million a year turnover will be asking you these questions, so you ultimately going to need to know the answers. The big one here is sector risks, and from, you know, obvious that a temporary work agency or an employment agency, anyone that's supplying staff, is going to be in a high risk sector, because that's what you do. You supply people. What do you need to look out for? Well, there's some really obvious things, and you know that it's interesting. We've just done the analysis at a client's where they were like, no, everything's fine. We do it on a regular basis. Our compliance team do it on a regular basis. But we found a cluster of workers at a particular site that have all got the same mobile phone number listed, that have all got the same address listed, who actually, when they've dug into it a bit deeper, actually there's only one sort of spokesperson for that group of people. So that's obviously set alarm bells ringing, and we need to look into that. I had another one a few weeks ago where we won a contract to supply labour into an end user client, and we're talking with the general counsel and the directors about the difficulties that we were having in trying to oust the incumbent agency and get the workers transferred over. And as a result of that conversation, both me and their in-house general counsel, about half an hour in, both stopped and said, we've got a modern slavery issue here quite clearly. There's a gangmaster that's in charge of these 60 odd people that are all living in the same street, that are all transported at the same time. No one's able to talk to them. They're it just, you know, in the 21st century in modern Britain, that really slavery wouldn't exist, but you know, it does, and it continues to sort of to surprise me just how often you can find it. You know, these are all things that really, you know, need to happen. So when you say, oh, can you just give me a statement to put on my website? It's like, well, yes, but ultimately it's not worth anything unless you've done the work behind it. Because if you've made a statement that everything's hunky-dory and then it turns out that it's not, then you're going to have very little manoeuvrability should there be a problem.